One morning, the world woke up, and Europe was floating. Yes, a whole continent, drifting on the ocean like a giant island. Paris moved into the Atlantic. People in Spain were waving at New Yorkers. And that was just the beginning. Europe crashed into America. Then someone said, let's put rockets on it. And suddenly, Europe flew to the moon. But when it landed there, they found something strange under the moon's surface. You've never seen anything like this before. This is the day Europe floated away. Are you ready? Welcome to Chronoverse. Let's begin.
Year 21 to 47. The sky was a little too blue. The birds were flying in strange patterns. And the scientists? They were sweating. A lot. Something big was happening. Something no one expected. Europe was shaking. Not from an earthquake, but from a bubble. Yes, a bubble. A giant layer of heated gas was forming under the European plate. It started with small tremors in Paris. Then fountains in Rome began spraying sideways. And in Berlin, coffee cups were sliding off tables without warning. At first, people laughed. Oh, it's probably global warming, someone said. Maybe Italy is finally becoming spicy enough to float, joked another. But the truth? Europe was rising, literally. In a secret lab under Norway, a team of geoengineers had tried something new. Their mission? To warm the Earth's crust slightly under Europe. Why? To test if floating cities could be real, like Venice, but for the whole continent. They injected heat plasma tech into the tectonic layer. It was supposed to be small, controlled, but guess what? It worked. Too well. One morning, people woke up and found beaches missing, not just the water, the actual sand. Spain's coastline was 10 meters above sea level. The Eiffel Tower looked taller because it was. Europe had started to lift, not by inches, by meters. Oh no, said one scientist. We have turned Europe into a giant boat. People panicked. Airports closed. Ships couldn't dock. And worst of all, Google Maps didn't work. It showed Europe slowly drifting west. The United Nations held an emergency meeting. Everyone was shouting, is this an attack? Are aliens pulling Europe with a space magnet? Did Elon Musk do this? But the answer was simple. Earth had burped, and Europe was on the bubble. Meanwhile, regular people were adapting. In London, people started surfing down the street. In Amsterdam, the canals overflowed, and someone turned them into floating gardens. In Warsaw, drones began delivering food since roads were useless now. Oh, moment number 1. A massive whale was spotted swimming under Vienna. Yes, under Vienna. Because the ground had lifted and the sea had crept underneath. Europe had become a floating island. And it was moving. Slowly but surely the continent drifted 3 kilometers every day. It passed Gibraltar like a cruise ship. Tourists waved. Some tried to jump on board. Governments called this event the Great European Drift, and still, nobody could stop it. Scientists tried anchoring Europe with mega chains to the seafloor. Didn't work. The chains snapped like spaghetti. Oh. Moment number 2. The Leaning Tower of Pisa? It stopped leaning. Because the tectonic tilt adjusted. Now it was straight. People were more shocked by that than the drifting. As Europe floated away, weird things began happening. The magnetic field over the continent became unstable. Clocks started losing time. Plants began growing faster, like 3x speed. People joked, at least now we can grow pizza trees faster. But in secret, scientists were scared. Very scared. In Brussels, the European Union tried making rules. No heavy jumping near the edges. Mandatory life jackets on rooftops. A floating tax for sea-crossing birds. It was chaos. But strangely, it worked. People adjusted. They put rubber wheels under houses. They created drone bridges between cities. And the best part, the weather was perfect. Since Europe kept moving, it always had spring. Kids were born who had never known a fixed country. To them, floating cities were normal. Moving parks, fun, rolling mountains, better than theme parks. A new generation was rising, the floatlings. But far away, in the icy labs of Greenland, a new problem was rising. As Europe moved west, it was heading straight toward America, and America was not ready for a continental visitor. Europe was no longer a continent. It was now a continent-sized cruise ship, drifting slowly through the Atlantic, heading west. But where was it going? The answer: America. Yes, the entire continent of Europe was floating straight towards the United States. The White House was in panic mode. "Sir, Europe is moving at 3.2 kilometers per day," one advisor said. The president blinked. "That's slow," he said. "Not when it's a 10 million square kilometer iceberg with baguettes," the advisor yelled. Meanwhile, in Europe, people were enjoying the ride. They had invented new ways of living. France held the first floating fashion week. Italy opened a pizza shop that delivered by submarine. Germany invented a beer mug that refilled itself using ocean condensation, but not everything was fun. The Atlantic was getting rough, storms were hitting harder, winds were strange, and sea creatures were showing up in weird places. Oh. Moment number 1. A giant squid was found in a swimming pool in Madrid. No one knew how it got there. It refused to leave. People named it Señor Tentaculo. Back in America, people were watching Europe approach like a weather forecast. News headlines screamed, "Europe ETA, 3 weeks. Brace for British bump." "Will Paris land in Pennsylvania?" Satellite images showed the massive floating land getting closer and closer. To prepare, the U.S. started building the world's biggest water cushion, a floating shock absorber made of old car tires, trampolines, and bouncy castles. Yes, it was ridiculous, but it was the best idea they had. In the middle of the Atlantic, something happened. Europe began to tilt slightly to the left. Portugal dipped lower. Finland rose higher. Why? Because Norway was hoarding gravity. They had built an experimental gravity booster to keep snow from floating away. Instead, they pulled Europe's balance off. As a result, buildings in Portugal were now slanted. People were skiing uphill in Sweden, and Amsterdam became the world's first floating spiral city. But America had bigger worries. They feared a crash. Imagine it. New York meets Paris. Literally. Lasagna falls into cheeseburgers. Football and football get confused forever. The U.S. Coast Guard started shouting warnings. But Europe didn't care. In fact, they were having a party. A giant concert was held across London, Rome, and Budapest at the same time. It was called the Float Fest. People danced on rooftops. Drones dropped free chocolate from Switzerland. Dutch DJs played music that echoed across the Atlantic. Oh. Moment number 2. During the concert, the northern lights appeared over Madrid. That had never happened before. Scientists said, "The Earth's magnetic field is partying too." Finally, the moment came. Europe reached the American coast. People on both sides held their breath. Cameras were everywhere. Drones flew in swarms. Tension was so high even birds were nervous. 2, 1, bump. The collision was gentle, thanks to America's bouncy castle defense wall. There was no destruction, just a soft bowing. Cheers erupted. People clapped from both continents. Flags waved. Selfies exploded across the internet. The new map looked insane. Europe was now parked along the U.S. East Coast. Ireland was next to Boston. Spain touched Florida. Norway was nearly poking Canada. Suddenly, travel time was 0. Want to go from Paris to New York? Just walk across the Friendship Bridge. Yes, that was real. A giant floating bridge made from recycled wine barrels and IKEA furniture. Soon, Europe and America started blending. A new era began, the Atlantic Union. Here's what changed. European breakfast, plus American dinner, 24-hour restaurants. French baguettes were sold in Walmart. American baseball teams played on floating stadiums in Venice, and for the first time ever, people could have lunch in Madrid and be back in Miami for dinner. Of course, not everything was perfect. Few problems popped up. GPS stopped working. Why? because satellites didn't expect Europe to move. Your phone would say, "You are in Poland," when you were clearly in New Jersey. Wild animals started migrating weirdly. One group of reindeer was spotted sunbathing in the Bahamas. Europe had its own laws, which clashed with America's. Example: in Texas, you could drive big trucks. But when you crossed into floating France, you needed a license to ride an electric snail scooter. Confusing? Yes, but hilarious. Still, the two continents tried to get along. They formed a joint council called the Continental Parliament. It met every Thursday on a floating boat between Lisbon and Atlanta. One of the rules: all meetings must serve both croissants and corn dogs. Translators must speak both American slang and sarcastic British English. But as people partied and celebrated, scientists discovered something troubling. Beneath the Atlantic Ocean, a crack was forming. A deep crack. It seemed Earth was not happy. The drifting had caused a tear in the planet's crust. If it got worse, the ocean floor might split open, and that would mean a megaquake. In a secret science base floating above Iceland, a meeting was called. Experts said, "Europe can't stay here. It's too heavy, too unstable. If we don't move the continent soon, the Atlantic might collapse." Everyone gasped. But how do you move a continent? One idea was to attach giant propellers to the Alps. Another idea: use 500,000 dolphins, trained to push. But the most serious proposal was attach rocket boosters to Europe and move it to the moon. Yes, to the moon. People laughed at first, but slowly they realized it might be the only way. Episode 3 will explore that wild plan. Will Europe become the first floating space continent? Will pizza survive space travel? Will the Eiffel Tower stand on the moon? The plan was crazy, no, beyond crazy. Move the entire continent of Europe onto the moon. Yes, the moon. The big gray rock in the sky that makes the tides dance. Why? Because staying on Earth was now dangerous. After Europe bumped into America, something strange happened. The Atlantic Ocean started to bubble. Cracks formed on the ocean floor. Volcanoes in Iceland began to hiccup. And one morning, a baby island popped up between Greenland and Scotland. People called it Oopsland. Scientists were terrified. They said the Earth's crust was becoming stretchy like pizza dough. And if Europe stayed where it was, Earth might rip in half. So they proposed the unthinkable: launch Europe into space. At first, people laughed. Will we eat moon cheese with French wine? Can I still get Wi-Fi on the moon? Will Italy still be shaped like a boot up there? But the plan was real, and the name, Project Lunape, short for Lunar Europe. The plan had 5 phases. Attach rocket boosters to the edges of Europe. Use AI to calculate lunar orbit entry. Build a giant space sail to catch solar wind. Float Europe out of Earth's gravity land softly. On the moon using reverse booster sounds simple, right? It wasn't. People across Europe prepared. In Spain, football stadiums became launch pads. In Sweden, IKEA built foldable moon shelters. In Italy, engineers designed pizza ovens that work without gravity. Oh. Moment number 1. France invented anti-spill wine glasses that work even during liftoff. Meanwhile, Germany handled the rockets. They built 12 mega boosters, each one taller than the Eiffel Tower. They were named after classical composers, like Rocket Beethoven and Booster Bach. Kids were trained in zero-gravity classrooms. Floating math was harder than expected. And cats? They hated it. The EU declared, all pets must pass space training before liftoff. Yes, even goldfish. America helped too. NASA provided old rocket parts, Canada sent maple-flavored oxygen tanks, and Switzerland made space chocolate, which sold out instantly. A special alliance was formed, ESA 2.0, Earth-Space Agreement together. They prepared for the biggest liftoff in human history. Finally, the day came. The year, 2150. The location: all of Europe. The mission: fly to the moon. People were nervous. Children held onto space helmets. Grandparents kissed Earth goodbye. And robots took one last selfie with trees. The countdown began. 9, 8. The ground rumbled, oceans boiled. 6, 5. Birds screamed, mountains shook. 3, 2, 1. Lift off. It was the strangest sound in history. A deep thunder, followed by a musical hum. Each booster played classical music as it fired. Europe was rising, higher, higher into the sky. People screamed, laughed, cried. Europe was flying. The launch caused a global eclipse. For 3 minutes, sunlight was blocked by the continent's shadow. Cows in Africa looked confused. Satellites had to move aside, and then silence. Europe had left Earth's atmosphere. But space is never simple. Halfway to the moon, something went wrong. The main AI, named Sir Orbiton, glitched. Instead of calculating a safe orbit, it started speaking in ancient Latin. Oh, moment number 2. Sir Orbiton began quoting Roman poetry instead of piloting. Engineers panicked. One Swedish teenager who spoke Latin for fun saved the day. He whispered, "Sir Orbiton, please calculate new course in English." It worked. Europe approached. The moon looked nervous. It had never hosted a continent before. NASA called it the first cosmic real estate deal. Landing was delicate. The boosters slowed down. Solar sails retracted. Thousands held their breath. Then, boomph, a soft, giant landing, like a feather. The size of a planet, Europe had landed. On the moon, flags were planted. Not just one, but 27. Each European country claimed a tiny crater. New cities formed quickly. Lunape, a lunar version of Europe's capital. Munich, Germany's floating beer dome. Florent Moon, Italian art museum in a gravity-free. Bubble, Brusteller, Brussels. But with rockets, roads were replaced by hover trains. Water came from melted comet ice. Food was 3D printed. The first moon McDonald's opened in former Belgium. But there were challenges. Dust storms. Moon dust is everywhere. Low gravity made people jump too high. Some landed in other countries, by accident. Time felt strange. A day on the moon lasts 29 Earth days, so people lived in rotating time zones called moody hours. Still, life adapted. People invented moon sports, like zero-gravity football and crater surfing. Artists painted on stardust. Kids played with floating marbles. And the best part? No, mosquitoes. But far away, Earth looked lonely. People missed the smell of grass, rain, fresh coffee air. One child asked, "Can we visit Earth on holidays?" Plans began for shuttles between Earth and Lunape. The Earth-Moon friendship had just begun. But a final twist was coming. As scientists explored deeper into the moon's crust, they found something unexpected. A buried chamber. Ancient, not natural. It had markings, not human. A door, with glowing symbols. The chamber started to pulse. Something inside was waking up. Was it alien? Was it ancient Earth tech? No one knew. But it had just opened its eyes. Europe was now on the moon. The Earth looked tiny in the sky, just a blue marble. People had gotten used to floating toilets, anti-gravity pizza, and zero-gravity haircuts. Life was weird, but fun. Then, they found the door. It was buried under the lunar surface. Deep inside a crater near where floating Finland had landed. The door wasn't made of rock or metal. It was smooth, glowing, humming like a lullaby. Scientists scanned it. Engineers poked it. Philosophers just stared and whispered, "Wow." No. One could explain it. Then the door opened. By itself. Oh. Moment number 1. Inside was a spiral staircase and going straight down into the moon's core. Not possible. The moon was supposed to be solid. But this wasn't science anymore. This was something else. A brave team of explorers was chosen. They entered the glowing door. Down, down, down they went. Past floating crystals, past glowing roots, past symbols no one could read. Finally they reached the chamber. It was huge, round, shining like a diamond, and in the center there was a floating object, not a machine, not a statue. It was a seed, a living, glowing seed, pulsing like a heartbeat. Suddenly, a voice filled the air, not from speakers. From inside their heads it said, "Welcome, Earth children. You have reached the Ark." Everyone froze. Who said that? Was it the moon? A god? A super AI? The voice continued. This moon is not a rock. It is a ship, a seed bank of life, a protector. And you have reactivated it. People on the surface could now hear the voice too. The moon began to glow brighter. Its orbit changed slightly. Gravity shifted again. Suddenly, the moon's surface cracked open like flower petals. Inside were huge energy panels, organic machines, and rooms. Full of DNA, thousands of DNA samples, from species long extinct, woolly mammoths, dinosaurs, unknown creatures. The moon was a cosmic Noah's Ark. Oh. Moment number 2. The moon had been placed there by ancient aliens, not to look pretty, but to protect life in case Earth failed. Europe landing on the moon had woken it up. The aliens had left a message. When the caretakers arrive, the Ark shall rise again. Europeans were now the caretakers. Earth was shocked. Governments held emergency meetings. Some cheered, some panicked. Others tried to claim moon property. But Europe made a decision. The moon must be shared, not owned, not sold, protected. They renamed it New Gaia, a second chance for life. Back inside the moon, things got stranger. The Ark began building. Using lunar dust, solar wind, and alien tech, it constructed new habitats, floating forests, artificial lakes, air domes with blue skies. Europeans were now living in paradise and made by ancient beings, but there was a warning. The voice returned. Earth is changing. The crack is growing. You must prepare. Back on Earth, the giant crack under the Atlantic had widened. New continents were shifting. Ocean levels danced like soda fizz. It was clear Earth had maybe 100 years left. So, New Gaia, the moon, became the new hope. People from all continents began preparing to migrate. Ships were launched. Tunnels were tested. Even floating elevators from orbit were built. But not everyone could go at once. Europe became the gateway to New Gaia. They helped train the rest of the world, taught moon farming, shared their moon houses. Even the squid from Madrid, Senor Tentaculo, now ran a moon sushi bar. Peace was spreading. For the first time in centuries, Earth united, not for war, but to move forward together. Years passed. Europe flourished on the moon. They built cities and craters, floating museums, and even a gravity-free opera where singers floated mid-song. New holidays were created. Liftoff Day, First Moonstep, Earth Memory Day. People never forgot their home planet. They just evolved. In the final twist of fate, the Ark did something unexpected. It activated a new engine, not a rocket. Not solar sails, but a quantum jump drive. The moon began to move, not just orbit, travel, destination, another solar system. The Ark's message was clear. The future of life is not here, it is out there. The people of Earth had a choice. Stay on the dying Earth, or join Europe and sail into the stars. Billions chose hope. In giant migration waves, they launched toward New Gaia. And then, the moon jumped. A bright flash, a ripple in space, and it vanished. The moon was gone. But in its place, a new star appeared in the sky. It blinked once like a goodbye wink. Epilogue, 1,000 years later. Children on a blue and green planet looked up at the night sky. One asked, "Is it true that the moon was once our home?" The teacher smiled. "Yes," she said. Our ancestors moved the continents, sailed the seas, and flew to the sky. And now, we live in the stars. The child asked, "Where is Earth now?" The teacher pointed to a small blue planet in the telescope. It's still there, sleeping, waiting, like a seed in winter. The end, the day Europe floated away, was not just a story of land, but a story of life, courage, and evolution. From floating cities, to moon adventures, to cosmic discovery, it all started when Europe went for a swim, and ended with a new beginning.